Maybe we just don't drink alcohol. Welcome back, listeners, or if you are new, welcome to the Digital Divide Podcast. I am Justin Fry.
And I am Joshua Charletto.
This is episode 19, so let's cut to the chase. All right, let's talk about these news articles then.
Let's talk about it.
Let's just go on in this. Tell me about yours. What the heck is building backdoors and encrypted services? That sounds dangerous.
Yeah, so on the podcast some episodes ago, because I never remember them after we published them and I'm a terrible person.
I was like, hey, do you remember what you guys talked about in episode 13? I'm like, what did we talk about on episode
No,
13?
literally, people ask me, what is your podcast about this week? And, it's the one we just published and we're already working on the next. And I'm like, oh, I don't even remember. I'm a terrible garbage person. So,
terrible garbage person. Nice.
So anyway, I don't know. Some time ago, we talked about Australia was looking into having some laws on the docket and passed or not passed or talking about, I'm not even sure, passing a law for building backdoors into encrypted systems. And I kind of expressed the opinion that I don't think that's a really great idea. And I was semi-shocked that it even was brought up as a subject. And then this last week, there was a news article on Mac rumors, which, I peruse because I'm an Apple fanboy in some ways. But
never
on Mac rumors, there was an article entitled "Five Eyes: Governments Urge Tech Companies to Build Backdoors into Encrypted Services." And so there are 5 nations, which include the US and UK, that are urging tech companies to build backdoors into these encrypted systems. And I was appalled when Australia was talking about it. I'm even more appalled that the US is even considering it.
That's ridiculous. It just brings me back to the San Bernardino case with Apple and the phone, unlocking the phone and basically denying the that they would do so. I don't know. It just makes me feel uncomfortable. It's somebody's personal space. Regardless, it's just a touchy subject.
It is, because the law does not yet fully embrace people's digital data as their property.
Yeah.
The idea and the concept is there, and they say that sometimes to make people happy, I think. However, when it comes to actual law enforcement cases and, having to get that data, there's a lot of the cases where they throw that out the window and it's not considered the same. Somehow it's not the same thing as like physical property. And I don't know how I feel about that personally yet. I mean, so how could they know how they feel? They are the ones who have to make these laws to govern everybody. And I'm not trying to make excuses, because I feel like we should have already caught up to this point. I mean, everybody is building not only their identity, but also everything they do now is almost all online. So regardless, this troubles me, and I'm hoping that it's just a discussion and there's no force applied behind it and there's no laws that get made out of it and that kind of thing. Because I think personally that's not a good thing. The peace of mind and the feeling of property that I have from having my data encrypted and secured from the companies that I trust is something that I cherish and that I would like to keep it that way. Yeah. And this threatens that whole situation. So
it's almost like you're throwing out a feature that will bring people like yourself and me to that particular company. I purposely pick Apple, or I purposely pick using Apple's iMessage service because I know that those messages are encrypted and so on and so forth. So the idea that they would be creating some sort of backdoor, I'm not saying Apple is, but basically some major company adding a backdoor so that the government can go in and pull data, or if it's a crime, pull information off that phone. Just also opens the idea that if the government can do it, anybody else can do it. Like there's no way of stopping the government, for somebody within the government, a disgruntled employee, leaking how to use these backdoor services. Like there's literally, it just to me is the not just from a privacy standpoint, for just from it doesn't sound like a very good business decision. But hey, I didn't get majors. I didn't get a degree in business, nor did I get a degree in cyber security. So
Well, yeah, and that's the other part that I want to point out real quick, just so we don't go too long on it. But
yep,
and that is that when we say the government anyway, we're talking about lots and lots of different people in lots and lots of different positions in lots and lots of different branches of
yeah,
government. You know, local, state, uh, federal, and then even within that, you've got law enforcement, all kinds of things.
right,
And even if you just break it down to law enforcement, their interest in this kind of thing differs from what the government would have interest in. So
right.
their
Like,
interest is in building cases and putting the bad guys, in quotes, away. And that differs from what maybe the government would want with this information and data. So it's just a whole, there needs to be more discussion, and there needs to be a sussing out of what we actually want out of something like that before we start really telling companies to start building backdoors in. And what does it mean to have digital property? What does it mean to have digital data? Like, what do we define that is as rather? Is it property? Is it not? So just so much there. And I think that the reason I'm bringing this up, and we'll put it in the show notes. Last thing I'll say is that this is the beginning of the discussion, and I think this is the wrong part to start on. So
yeah,
so anyway, I hope it gets further discussed and moves down the pike a little bit here. So
yeah. Got to make sure all those park rangers can get into the DNR websites.
that's right.
And
It's important.
so
They need to know who is feeding Yogi.
Exactly. My topic actually talks about surprise, surprise, and it's not a gaming article. Surprise, surprise.
That is amazing. I'm looking
Yeah,
through
it
the
is.
notes here. Are we going to get through a whole episode without talking about video games?
Well, maybe. I mean, we're ruining it now, but we won't have any specific call-outs. There probably will be because there's some things in the topic that I'll talk about. But there's something that this news article came up, and it's actually nothing new, to be honest with you. And it's a news article by Business Insider talking about and pointing out the fact that, quote, more Apple fans are building Hackintoshes, and which points out a large flaw in the Mac universe or Apple's product line. And I have mixed emotions and mixed feelings about this, mainly because I have tried creating and have successfully made 2 Hackintoshes, but within a week stopped. I basically said I just wiped my computer and said I don't want to do this. So to be clear, Hackintosh is essentially building a PC, personal computer. Who even calls it that nowadays? I don't think anybody calls it a personal computer.
The PC makers do?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Because they don't want to call it a Windows computer because that's giving Windows more advertising.
Yeah, because it could be a Linux box. It could be anything. The Hackintosh is essentially using non-Apple approved hardware and putting the software on it. Or, in our case, custom building a PC that with specs that are compatible with the OS and installing the OS using some tools, third-party tools to install the software successfully, add drivers, etc. So you can essentially pay less to get a better Mac or a better iMac. The article just points out a lot of things that people are already talking about. How, one, it's cheaper to build these custom PCs and put the OS on there, and it points out that the prices right now for the iMacs are out of this world, blah blah blah, and that could be true to some people. And if you're looking at it from an outsider looking in and not having really any say or preference to Apple or anything outside of that, sure. But it's just an interesting article because if somebody who is listening to this podcast or somehow gets a hold of our show notes, you can see that there are options for you if you choose to do so, except air of caution. It's not as easy as it seems. It has gotten a lot better. Please, I mean, by all means, if you have the time, put the effort into making one. But yeah, so I think this is ideally coming out. This news article came out, I think, around a really good time because we're having the Apple iPhone event this Wednesday, September 12th. And then we're also supposedly getting either an additional conference, which I highly doubt it, or it's just going to be a press release, maybe, who knows, on the new Mac lineup, if there is any. So take a look at it. It's interesting. I've always liked the idea of Hackintoshes, but in the end of the day, I went, why don't I just buy a dang Mac because it works? I don't have to go through all this effort. It's too much. So,
one thing I want to mention that building a Hackintosh technically exceeds the licensing agreement for the the Apple OS, which is no longer Mac OS. It is my goodness, Joshua. It is OS 10. It's just Mac OS. Sorry, it's Mac OS.
No, it's Mac OS.
Yep,
yes.
Mac OS. It exceeds the licensing agreement for Mac OS, so therefore it can technically be illegal depending on when they take you to court if they do. So I do not recommend doing it. However, if you decide to do it, it's not as hard as it used to be.
Yeah, and professionals do create them, to be quite fair, because some people just get fed up and don't want to pay $4,000 for or $5,000 for an iMac Pro. They can pay $2,000 for a crazy beefed out device. But to be honest with the rise in graphics card prices, the rise in RAM and / memory, it's ridiculous. And almost might be as expensive as buying an iMac. So
there are a lot of things to consider and a lot of pitfalls, and it's a very fragile system if you build one. And if you consider doing it, you have to sink money into doing it, and you could be wrong with the parts that you build. And then it exceeds the licensing agreement, so it's technically illegal.
Yeah, there's a lot of things pointing against doing it. So, we are not condoning this.
Yes,
obviously,
I want to point that out.
We are not condoning this. We're just saying there are options. Anyways, hey, you know what's funny? We actually have follow-up. That's not something that we have follow-up for.
Oh, right. So
we had somebody send us a link to, and I guess I can't remember what episode it was, but we talked about Axe body spray. I don't remember what one it was, but this article was sent to us, and it's actually a semi-truck full of Axe body spray that caught fire in Tampa Bay, Florida. And there'll be a link, and I'm going to try and get you guys the link that's not to the Facebook page, but more just the news article. But there's a snapshot, or at least a screenshot of the picture, and it's just this big old truck on fire. I'm sure it smelled so bad, like gym locker rooms back in middle school. I could only imagine what that smelled like.
Yeah. Ugh. Did the picture have the pile of women that obviously would be throwing themselves at the scent?
Probably not. That would be very bad.
Oh, does it not work? I didn't know that. That's interesting.
I wonder if Axe would try and play off of this article or this news event. I think here's an idea. Axe, if there's anybody out there listening, have a TV show, or not TV show, an ad on the TV, and show maybe some clips of this happening, and then no, that would be bad. I take that back. You wouldn't want women jumping into a fire.
Yeah, no, that's generally not a good idea. Fire.
Maybe you could
people.
have them circle around it and say that there was an increase in. Never mind. Well, this joke went far.
Yeah, now that we lost the other 2 people listening to our podcast when we told women to jump into fire.
Please don't do that.
Let's move on to our actual topic.
Yes, so Josh and I think we've talked about this topic amongst ourselves, but not the topic itself, but the idea of reading books, or just the joy that we get out of reading books, whether they're digital or physical. So we figured we want to talk to you people about them, kind of give you what we like, the genres, like how we're reading our books, because I think in a day and age like this, there are several ways to read books, and people have preferences. I have preferences. Josh may or may not have the same preferences. Probably not, because he's a different person.
I am?
And yeah, I know we're not the same person.
Oh my.
Surprise.
I had no idea.
Yeah,
This
we
changes
do start.
everything.
We do have the first say are the same letter in our name. The first letter in our name is the same.
That's true.
This is the literally the only thing. Uh, but and then we have also. I'd like to talk about the future of reading books, because 20 years ago, I wasn't reading on an iPad. Surprise, surprise. So, I don't know where you want to start this off. Do you want to talk about like why we love them, or if genres? What do you want to do?
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about why we love them.
Okay, well, why do you love them? Because I'd like to start you first.
Why do I love books? Let's see.
Joshua, yes. Why do you love books?
This is either going to be, it's an opinion, of course, like everything else that I say, but
We're millennials.
it's either
Oh,
going
wait,
to
you're
make
not.
people angry or not, or maybe people won't care. But in my opinion, it is the greatest delivery system for story ever created, and continues to do so in every respect. So you can watch TV, you can play video games, which I love, and come to a close second,
Dang.
very close second.
You just referenced it. Good job.
I did say the words. I'm so sorry. Anyway, video games obviously give you a different way into a story,
Yeah.
but a book lets you inside of a character's head, and or multiple characters, and or like you see more of what's going on in a book. You're you're given more perspective. You're able to become both the, you know, enjoyer of entertainment, but also you're able to see more things than, somebody who basically you see everything at once, and it's pretty great. So I think that being able to see a story from all angles and from different viewpoints not only has the ability to tell a great story, but you can learn things about yourself or learn things about how you feel about things, or kind
Yeah.
of even play the scenario in your head and understand why characters may have chosen the choices they do. So I mean the list goes on, but the point is that I think it's the greatest way to intake a story, and that's why I like books.
It's like the way I think about it too is when you're reading, you sort of set the scene in your mind, that you're creating this environment in your brain and or your imagination, and you're playing it off as you're reading it. So one way for me to enjoy books is if it's a good book and they can actually tell a story to the point where I can then visualize that in my head. Um, One of the biggest reasons why I like to play off what you just said is because I like to play through that in my head. I like to create this new world or some imaginary world in my head through the words that, or while I'm reading the book. And if the author is able to do so, whether it's like a fight that's going on or they're describing the scenery that the person is, or the character is or surrounded by, to me that is the perfect way of explaining and perfect way of describing this this event, this scene in your brain. And if they can do it perfect, if they can do it that way to the point where it's vivid, it's very descriptive, and you can think of like all the things that are happening, and it's flowing very well. That's a good book, and that's why I like reading them. Immediately you'll know, or at least I do, if I start reading and I can't get hooked, I can't. I don't force myself to read the rest of the book. I don't know, Josh, if you do this, but it'll get to a point where if it's not pulling me in, I'm not gonna waste my time, because there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other books that I could be reading.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I am sometimes bad at that part of it.
Yeah,
Well, I should back up. If it's a book that has I have no tie to, like I just pick up a book, I heard it was good, and I
yeah,
start reading, and I'll give it anywhere between 10 pages to the end of the first chapter, and then if I'm not hooked, I'm just out. Like I have no desire to slog through a book like that. And unfortunately for me, the the way that I read and my time that I put into reading, it takes a lot of effort on my part. So
Yeah.
if I get to that point, I just there's no way. I'm out. But unfortunately, I also have the disease of being a completionist, and I'm using disease in a joking way, but I'm a
No, you're not, because it's totally a problem because it does interrupt everything
yeah, I am a
in your life.
completionist for sure. And what happens is if there's, say, a book where there's a franchise involved in the book that I'm super engrossed in, like for instance, this is a total random example, but like Spider-Man. Let's say I love Spider-Man, which I do,
Yeah.
and I pick up a book like a novel written about Spider-Man. Because I'm invested in Spider-Man, suddenly now I'm reading this novel and like maybe I'm not enjoying it, but because it's about Spider-Man, I'm going to get through it. And I tell myself that I need to finish this book and I have to finish this book. And there's no reason I'm not going to finish this book. And it becomes this like slog, like I said before, of trying to fight my way through it. And then I'm not enjoying myself. And then reading becomes a chore. And then I stopped reading. And, that's how that always goes. So
Right.
sometimes I'm not good at it. And sometimes I need a friend, Justin, to tell me like you should just stop reading the book and read something else. Um,
Yeah.
and sometimes that works, and sometimes that helps. So, yeah, I want to go back a step real quick.
Yep.
You mentioned some of the reasons you love books, and I think they're the better way to say it. And I appreciate you pointing it out. A big part of it for me is exploration. Like I love exploring other worlds and other
Yeah.
ideas, and seeing the things that people come up with and create. I love that so much. And that's a
Yeah.
big part of video games for me too. But books do it better. Like you can describe things, like you said, so much
Yeah.
more vividly and paint this picture. And I have a super overactive imagination. I didn't know if anybody knows that, so I wanted to point it out. And that is that my imagination runs wild constantly, and so giving it something in a book to kind of fixate on and just build that mind's theater, mind's eye type
Yeah.
situation is so fun. When you get a great book like that and I feel like I'm there, and I love that about books.
Yeah, it's also it's entertaining and exercising your brain. I think that's a main reason why my parents, specifically my mom, made me not made me, but as I was growing up, hey, you should be reading this. Why don't you try reading this? And I get more enjoyment because out of reading books in general. Just like I'm trying to compare it, like if I'm playing video games or if I'm watching a movie, I will always get more enjoyment out of reading just because it just seems like for me it is the better medium to get that story across. Movies always disappoint me, as people already know. I consider myself a critic when it comes to movies that come from books or movies that are trying to pull in more of a broader audience, and it bothers the heck out of me. But um, I really think that if someone were to say, "Would you rather read a book, play a video game, or watch a movie or a TV series?" I'd say book, hands down. And because there are other things alongside that come with reading a book. I'm one of the reasons why I love reading too is that if I have like a cup of coffee, and this is gonna sound real stupid, but having like a cup of coffee and reading a book to me is just something more of a memory based thing, but it somehow enhances the whole scenario for me. So
I think there's a lot of
uh,
people that how do I put it? Engaging other sensory parts of your body while you're, reading really
that's
helps. That's the worst way to
explicit.
put it, really. I'm very sorry,
That's
audience.
terrible.
Um, but an example is I saw a guy on Reddit who was like, if you
Oh
really
God.
want to get through books real fast and really enjoy the experience even more, put on a fitting soundtrack or something that fits that genre of book and then start reading. And for me, I can't do that. Like
What?
I have to have
No.
quiet. But for some people, that's huge, and that changes the whole experience. Just like your coffee example, and not like my horribly explicit way of saying it.
Yeah. Well, but people like for myself when I'm writing certain things, whether it's when I was writing a paper for school or writing a post or something like that, like I like to have music play in the background, but it's not there. It's not a spoken word. It's not spoken word. There's nobody's saying anything in the music. It's like an orchestra or it's a musical score, a soundtrack from a TV show or a movie. So that's so weird, and I could never even do that with a book because I would just get so distracted in the music because I love that type of music, and that would just distract me.
Yeah,
But
I feel the
again,
same way,
to
but
each
for
their
some
own.
people, it stimulates their
Oh
imagination
yeah,
and, whatever. So,
that could be different.
well, so what kind, okay, so you love reading, and I, in a different way, probably love reading, but what kind of genres do you like to read then, Justin?
Well, he might be surprised here, Josh, but I like science fiction. I think. Well, let me rank it. Oh
No!
my! I know, right? Holy cow! Let me rank them because I definitely did not rank them in the notes. But uh, number one for sure, science fiction, hands down. Science fiction to me is the best. I love space. I love space, and I love space. So that's that.
Oh, so space
And
is really the
so
reason.
it's
Oh,
in
no, no, no,
laser
no, no,
beams
it's
and
space. Yeah,
lightsabers.
it's really space.
Yeah. Uh, and then I would say historical fiction and fantasy actually are tied because I love magic and I love magic and magic. And then for historical fiction, I'm a huge history buff, or at least uh, parts of history, and a former. I shouldn't say former because I still have a degree in history. And I always grew up liking history. When I was a kid in high school and middle school and whatnot, I always got yelled at for answering all the questions. So they told me never to answer questions in history class. So I stopped. So
That's
I was that
horrible.
loser. No, it wasn't because then I got to. Never mind.
That's
I
horrible.
just I just got to sit and enjoy class. So yeah, it was a
Horrible.
lot of fun. But anyways, enough about me. And then thriller and crime. But so I'd say science fiction, historical fiction, fantasy, and then thriller, crime novels. What about you?
This um, plays into the last thing we said about being grabbed by books and getting into them and
Yeah,
really I need a book to really grab me from the beginning. And it doesn't have to be like a big explosion or action sequence in your mind.
Michael Bay
Yeah,
movies.
it doesn't need to
Nothing.
be a Michael Bay movie in book form, but I need to be interested. And once I get interested, then I'm hooked and then I'm in. The problem is for me, that really only boils down to two, maybe three genres sometimes. So for me, to rank them as you did, since that's so important, science fiction and fantasy are tied for me. I go in different phases. I love, love, love science fiction, and generally, probably more often, I love science fiction. I love the idea of, like you said, space. It's the final frontiers, they say in that whatever that show was called way back from when. Um,
Oh, people are gonna yell at us for not remembering.
oh, I remember. I'm just being a jerk. And then I love the space, the laser swords, the lasers, the battles in space. I just love it all. And
Wait, was that Lost in Space?
no,
What was
it was
that?
Star Trek, dude.
Oh,
Anyway, the
that's
we're
awkward.
gonna cut all that out. So science fiction is great, and I love robots as well a lot, or giant robots that you can get into and smash each other with. But then
Robot
for
Smash.
me, fantasy also is really important. And fantasy, I don't know why, but like the magic, but like the mysticism. I love the science part of science fiction so much, but then I love to contrast that with like the mysticism and the mystery behind fantasy. Mystery, as in like we don't understand everything that's going on in the world type situation. Or being able to see creatures and beasts that could not ever, or things that could not ever exist in our reality in theory with what we know about science, so on and so on. So fantasy is really important to me. The thing that sometimes comes into play as my third sometimes is military fiction.
Yeah,
I've
that's good
always,
too.
always gotten into military topics to the point of going to the library constantly and getting books out on planes or weapons or battles, or I love that stuff. And sometimes military fiction books will grab me. The thing about it is that, and this is where I guess we differ.
Hmm.
As soon as it becomes like history, I generally am out. Like I
Oh,
don't
come
want to
on.
learn about history. I really don't want to learn. I want to be entertained. Um, and there are two exceptions on my list that maybe we'll get to at some point if I can stop talking. But the thing about military fiction is that I really get into the the concepts behind all that goes into being a trained soldier and what you do to prepare and how you come up with the tactical solutions and the strategic solutions. I love all that. So a great example is like Rainbow Six. I love Rainbow Six, and so yeah, that's the third genre for me.
Like Tom Clancy and all that
Yeah,
jazz.
yeah.
Gotcha. What Shooter had a series. There's the Bourne series. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff.
Yes, true.
Yeah, military fiction. I enjoyed too myself, but I wouldn't put it up there as like the top for me. So, but I totally forgot about that being a genre.
Yeah, there are good
But
books. I mean, not all of them are, but there are good ones.
yeah, how are you reading them? Like, how are you reading your books?
Almost exclusively on my iPhone.
Wait, hold on. That tiny screen you're reading your book on.
Yes, that tiny screen I'm reading my book on.
Oh, like doesn't it hurt your eyes
Um,
squinting? And how big do you have the text blown up?
I would say it's somewhere between 10 and 12 point.
Hold on a second. I gotta check this out. Keep talking.
Sure. So I use my iPhone because, as we've spoken about many times in this podcast, one of my major personality flaws is that I'm a lazy person. And in that vein, I will read if it's with me. And if it's with me, I will then read. So it's like this cyclical problem. And I cannot stand this. Goes back to all this stupid stuff. And now I sound like a crazy person as I say this. So I guess it's too late now. I don't want to carry a book with me. I really don't. I love books. I love the physical concept of books. I love the way they smell. I love paging through them. I love them as like an artifact on my shelf. I love books. I worked in a bookstore. I love them. Love them to death. However, they are still a physical object that I can't carry everywhere with myself. And when I'm waiting to get my hair cut, for instance, I can't just whip the book out of my pocket because most of them are mass market. So having my phone on me and being able to read anywhere I go, anytime, even just a couple of pages, is a huge value for me. Huge.
I feel like you were just in a jury, or you were just talking to a jury explaining why your phone is the way to read your book.
Yeah, maybe. And I don't think it's for everybody, but it's certainly important for me. I don't think I would be
Yeah.
reading as much or as active in reading if it wasn't for my phone. So I give my phone a lot of credit in that regard.
I don't think I've ever enjoyed reading it on my phone. I think it would be like a last resort for me to read on my phone. And I've had instances where I didn't have the physical book. This is where we differ, but I didn't have the physical book, nor did I have my iPad slash Kindle slash whatever device I had. I think even the last resort would be reading from a Mac, my laptop, which is
Oh, I've done that many times. I love that
all
too.
sorts of weird for me. But you like doing it off your iPhone, and then do you have anything else that you typically? It sounds like you do a lot of digital.
Yes, for sure. So, so how do I unravel this ball of wax here? So I have a Kindle as well, and I do enjoy my Kindle. The problem is that the Kindle then becomes a different ecosystem, which is so dumb, but it totally is. Like I almost exclusively buy all my books through iBooks,
Hmm.
which is Apple's bookstore, and obviously the Kindle, while more popular, is a different platform, and therefore, if I buy a book on one or the other, they don't sync between each other. And this
Yeah.
is another reason why the iPhone has become
Wait,
so. Yeah, go
it
ahead.
doesn't sync on. So if you had a Kindle Paperweight and I had a Kindle Fire, that Kindle app doesn't sync my pages.
It does. It does
Oh,
sync
I
between
thought you said
other
it did.
Kindle
Sorry.
devices, and it will sync between the Kindle app. However, I try to buy my books on iBooks. So then, if I have my book purchased in
Yeah,
iBooks,
you can't do it. Yeah.
then I need to either purchase the book in Kindle as well, and then, kind of guess where I am every time I switch back and forth between
Yeah, it's too
devices. It's
much.
just stupid. And, might as well just stick with my iPhone. And that kind of leads me to my Mac where iBooks does sync between Apple devices. So I
Yeah.
will fire it up on my Mac and I'll have my spot and then I'll just read from there. But I do like the Kindle a lot, and I think it's a great device. And I have the really basic, super basic one, no backlight, super, super basic, and I love it. And
Yeah, it looks good.
it's easy to read on. It works really well. You can't read in low light, which is another reason I love my phone. So that's another way I read books. And then I've always been a really big, for reasons maybe we can get into later, but I've always been a really, really big audiobook guy. Like
Yeah.
sound is really important to me, which is such a weird sentence to say, Josh. What is wrong with
Yeah,
you?
because you also just mentioned earlier saying that you would rather read the book, not listen to like noises in the background while reading. So
Well,
that's a little.
no, no, no. So sound is really important to me, and that's why I can't have sound while I'm reading. It distracts me 100%.
Okay.
I can't have
Okay.
sound playing at all. Like it's really important to have
Because you'd have
quiet.
problems focusing on one
Yeah,
or the
and
other.
this happens at work to me all the time. Like I get through my day and I'll be like, okay, I didn't get anything done because I was not focusing on anything and just grabbing emails that's coming in and just doing that real quick. Because
That doesn't happen.
yeah, right. Because, there's sound going on all the time around me and I don't focus on one thing. Like if I sat in a quiet room, I'd be totally focused on one thing and just, anyway, that's neither here nor there. So, audiobooks are great because um for me, I've had problems over the years with reading, which we can get into if you want to at some point, but uh, the audiobook lets me enjoy the story from a book, which is better, and I don't have to read it. So that was like a win-win during that time. And I've listened to a lot of books in audio format. So I really like it. And especially when I used to drive an hour and a half to work and back,
Yeah.
it was great because I would listen to podcasts constantly and audiobooks, and it was plenty of time. So, and then I'll read physical books because physical books are awesome. So yeah, that's me.
I, for me, I'm gonna tackle the audio book section in a second, but I've always been a huge fan of the physical book, physically reading the book itself because one, I like, this is sound really weird. I like the smell of books. As
No,
weird
I
as
just
that
said the same
sounds.
thing. They smell great.
Yeah,
There's a
they
specific
smell
smell.
great, and just the idea of seeing the physical, and having physical books stacked up next to each other to me is uniform, and it suits or not suits, but it calms and completes my need to have like a bookshelf full of books. To see that in a row, organized alphabetically, blah blah blah, and by the actual volume, that to me is it makes me feel good. It's definitely a feel good moment for me. But I like the physical reading, flipping the pages, earmarking, which I know certain people hate.
Me.
I try to avoid using that only when I don't have a bookmark, and I always resort to a Kleenex bookmark because I can never find or never carry around a piece of paper to put as a bookmark. But physical books for me, and I too have an iPad slash Kindle device that I read on. Honestly, most of the time I'm flipping between two. I'm flipping between the physical and iPad, really depending on when I'm reading the book, whether it's at night. I don't necessarily want to read with a light on, and as my wife is trying to fall asleep next to me, I don't want to have a light shining and casting shadows and all sorts of nonsense, because I'm sure that disorients her occasionally if she wakes up. So that's a problem for me. But what I like about having the iPad or the Kindle is being able to do just that and read at night. But there's times where I've done that and read way too late because I don't have to worry about the light shining, and it's just easy to flip through the pages, and sometimes you just keep going and going and going and you don't realize how far you were. But
Yeah.
yeah, those are my two things that I like. And I your audiobook thing, that more power to you. I've tried it. I don't like listening to audiobooks. I tried doing it when I was working out. I tried doing it when I had my long drives to work alone, to an hour long drive back and forth, and I just couldn't do it. Although I listen to podcasts, different story, but I just couldn't listen because I feel like I would zone out occasionally because I'm paying attention to driving, and I'd lose those pieces of the book that somebody's saying, like speaking and playing out with their voices fluctuating. Sometimes I'll miss out on key points
Yeah.
because I'm focusing on driving, and that's why or doing something in general. That's why I just can't use audiobooks. So that's usually it. So I'm more of a physical book reader than anything else. I don't read on my laptop. I can't do that. It just doesn't feel like a book to me. Then that's destroying the whole concept for me reading a book.
Understandable. Everybody has their preferences.
Yeah.
I think however you read is fine as long as you read, right? Isn't that the
Yeah, exactly.
tagline for parents or something?
Yeah, or hooked on phonics or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, Josh, now that we've talked about how we're reading these books, this is like perfect segues. What kind of book, or like, what are your favorite books? I mean, do you have anything besides Game of Thrones? Because we all knew that was coming. But are there any books, and you could talk about that too, but any books that you particularly would like to recommend or are your favorites?
Yeah, I don't want to. I mean, I have, let's see, 21 books on this list, so I'm going to try to,
Oh, God, I didn't even realize
yeah,
that.
jump around and maybe just highlight a couple, two, three of them here.
Koutoutre.
Because I don't want to run too long, but I would say the important ones are the Ender's Game series, so Ender's series by Orson
yeah.
Scott Card. That,
So good.
yeah, is a really important book series to me. That, oh man, that was like one of the first set of books that I found on my own and fell in love with, and then just read without somebody telling me I had to read the book.
And
And
that's a military science fiction. That's like a bam, double whammy.
yeah,
for
it is
you.
a double whammy, and it is so, so good. And it's funny, I was jealous after I got out of high school. They started actually teaching to that book in some high school
Yes.
classes, which is incredible.
And that
to me.
is how I read the book. It was one of my summer readings.
Oh, really?
And boy, was I happy I read it because that sparked the love for that series. And I'm considering rereading this series because I don't remember it because whatever reason, but I really want to get back into it. Anyways.
I've read the whole series twice, and then I've also
Oh my
listened
God.
to it on audiobook once as well. So I really
Yeah.
love those books.
Do you have them by any chance?
I have most of them, yes. Yes, I do, actually.
Are they
I think I have all of them.
digital or are they
Physical. I
physical?
have physical copies.
I might ask to borrow.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. And
Anyways.
then the other one that's really big for me that you mentioned, as we shouldn't talk about it, but I'm going to anyway, was The Song
That's
of Ice
fine.
and Fire, which is the Game of Thrones series,
Mm-hmm.
which is really just the name of the first book in the series. But since the TV show has taken off, that's the only thing they've named the TV show. Blasphemy.
Yeah.
But anyway, the reason I love that book series was that I don't want to sound like I care that it's awesome now because I'm so glad that it has a wide audience and that people are into it. Like it's such a great set of stories. But I I found it on accident. I was in a used
Really?
bookstore on a road trip, and I had bought a set of books
Gotta
from.
love those used
Yeah, I'm a
bookstores.
huge used bookstore fan. And I had bought a stack of books. They were like $2, $3 each from a bookstore on a road trip, and that was one of them. And I'd done the typical Josh thing, like crack open a book, read a few pages, not get into it. And after doing that with two out of the three, I did it finally with a Game of Thrones, which I had never heard of, and none of my friends had ever heard of because it was farther back. And I think only two of the books were out at the time. So
Mm-hmm.
now it's a 6 book series, or yeah, 5 book series, and the sixth one's coming.
5. Never will
Yeah,
He's gonna
God,
die
don't
before he
remind me.
finishes
Stop it!
it.
Stop it! Anyway, so I read the first book, could not put it down, and that other than Ender's Game, that was one of the few books that just I was dying to read, and I would spend every moment I could reading that book, and he was doing things in that book series that I had never seen before, like killing off main characters without,
Yeah.
no sign that this was going to happen, and just boom, dead.
Yeah. Hesitation was there was no hesitation.
And not that I need you to kill characters, but the point was that the story always felt living and always felt like real in the sense that there's always events going on and things outside of the character's control, and it's just so good. So that's a huge one for me. And all of those books are taxing to read, they are incredibly verbose books. Like he describes way too much detail in some stuff, and then also they don't really adhere to the typical like here's the rising action and the climax and the resolution. None of that's happened in those books. It's just this constant slog of crazy always happening. Anyway, and then the other set I would say is the Lord of the Rings. Like I know you don't like that series, but that to me is really really important. That was the quintessential journey with lots of lots of lore and lots of history and everything that they talk or he talks about in that book, wrote in that book, set of books. There's so much behind it, and you get this sense, no matter where you're reading, that everything has a history and everything has been touched before by something, or something's been has happened here, or something. There was a battle fought here long ago, and it's just always something going on in the history of that book, and you can just fall into it, and I love that about it. And then I'm going to say one more, even though I could keep going. All 21 are really important to me. But I would say recently the Expanse series is really, really awesome and super important to me, and thanks to you for showing it to me.
Of
I
course.
never knew sci-fi could be so adventurous and fun while being pretty decently hardcore science fiction. It's not really hardcore science fiction, but like the things that those authors have thought about,
It's so
it's
good.
like why hasn't anybody thought of that before as like a problem with space travel? So, but also while being incredibly adventurous and action packed and just so much fun. So,
Yeah.
that's 4 out of 21. I could keep going on and on and on. But what about you, Justin? What are some
No,
of your
and
favorites?
I'm gonna try and I'm gonna avoid the ones that you picked just because I don't want to be repeating them. But yeah, the Expanse. You're welcome, by the way, on the Expanse. That was, I think somebody told me about the TV show, and I started watching, which is also amazing. The TV show, and the moment they started showing people in space and there was no sound in space, I went, "Yep, they got it right." And I got 2 episodes and I was like, "Yep, I'm gonna read this book." This book, immediately realizing how amazing it was, and I actually, I can't. I have the newest book right above me right now, but it's a great series, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. They're long books, so if anybody's interested, they're definitely long reads. But for me, let's see. I would have to say I'm a huge. Okay. So there are certain video games that have produced, and I'm going to use this loosely, produced really, really good books. One being the Halo video games. Now, there are writers that have created completely canon books, canon meaning that they're books or pieces of information that are made within the universe that are relevant to the universe of that, uh, what do you want to call it, book. Like Star Wars has their own universe, and DC, Marvel, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So one of the books that came out of the Halo universe was the Halo Fall of Reach, which actually explains the how Master Chief got to where he was. But it was such a good book, and it just, being a person who loved the video game and the every single one of them except the most recent one, uh, this book just killed it. I mean, it was amazing. It was fun learning about the backstory about the Spartan program, etc., etc. And it was a very easy read and something that I'm glad I continue to read even as a 26-year-old, reading these books as they come out and loving them just as much as I did before. So definitely a rare occasion. I know there are books that come out of video games that aren't as good. I'm not entirely sure what those are because I'm very picky when it comes to that. Because I also don't want to ruin my like how I look at those video games. I don't want to ruin it for me if I get, read a bad book that's in that universe. So,
Yeah.
additionally, something that I think I've told, and I actually found was recommended from somebody at work, is the Red Rising series. Josh, I don't think you have read any of these.
No, I haven't.
So we had discussed how I liked science fiction and fantasy, not in that order, but and I enjoy books that try and play off of both genres in one, but seldom have I read a book or a series that has not only like pulled in that fantasy and science fiction, but then throw in like mythology, specifically Greek mythology, into the play, and absolutely killed it and hooked me in to the point where I read the first three books, the trilogy, in a matter of 2 weeks.
How can you do that? Ah, God, I'd get anything to read a book like that.
Yeah, it's called obsession and reading and not having kids, like reading late at night and
Thank you
staying
for
up
saying
till.
that. That helps a lot. I'm serious. I mean, I've never been able to do that, but that does help. So thank you. Go on.
Yeah, I don't have distractions. I read a lot. I read in
Oh, that's
between
good.
when I'm working out in the morning or things like that. So during cardio, that I can actually hold the book in front of me. But anyways, series is amazing. It's by, I think his name's Pierce Brown. Pierce. I'm just double checking. We're doing real time follow up. Yes, Pierce Brown. And he has technically these first three books. They're called the Red Rising trilogy, but it has an additional book that just came out. But my God, this is amazing. It's definitely meant for mature audiences. It's not something you would want your kid reading. There's a lot of blood and gore and some very descriptive scenes, and battle scenes specifically, that are amazing. But it is something that throws you for a loop. It gets you wrapped into the characters. It kills off main characters, so it does a lot of anti-cliche things, and I love it. And I really, really recommend this to anybody because it's so good.
Yeah, I'll
It's
have to
just
check it out for sure.
okay. And I have one more that is. Can I do two?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna do two more. One of them is. Dang it! There's so many on here.
Yeah, I know. Maybe do two more, and then maybe we'll just read off the list and not talk about them because
Yeah.
I'd like to call out some of the important ones too. At
Yes.
least just say the names.
Okay, Ready Player One for sure. I had to call that out.
Yeah, that's important. I love that book.
That is a fantastic book, and if you're into super 80s slash early 90s nostalgia, but mainly 80s nostalgia, and you think that era is the greatest era of all time, this book has so many call outs to that genre and plays to it so well, while pulling in a science fiction future-esque kind of, not post-apocalyptic because it's not like the apocalypse,
Well,
but
it kind of is a little bit post-apocalyptic.
in a sense,
Yeah.
yeah. But the movie just came out, and if you saw the movie, the book is so, in my personal opinion, is 99.99999% better than the movie, because obviously the book came first. But secondly, the book has so much more in it. The movie didn't even go. There's very small things that are actually in the movie that are relevant. The book is just so much better. You got to read it. It's basically involves video games, all the 80s, old school 80s memorabilia involved, and like merge that into a virtual reality quest to find the last, to basically quest to get the treasure at the end of the tunnel. So definitely go read that. And then my last one, oh gosh. I've said all these science fiction ones. I need to find Terms of Use. I'll give you that one. Terms of Use is actually written by an author, or by a journalist. Wow, I can't speak today. A journalist, and it kind of, it's not science fiction at all. It's more of a thriller, but it involves Silicon Valley. So it's really, really good. I strongly recommend it. I don't want to ruin it because the actual plot tells it all. You can, not that you can predict it, but it has a very easy flow, and I strongly suggest you read it. It's a fairly quick read, and is something that I didn't actually think I was going to like, and it was one of those recommendations from like Kindle or like Amazon. And to be quite honest, when it comes to books, Amazon's terrible at predicting what I should read.
Yeah.
But this one turned out pretty well, so But yeah, those are my, I guess I would say top four. And I'm excluding Harry Potter because that's given,
Ugh.
which I also have above all hardcover.
I will have to borrow that from you because I think it might be time to read that to my kids and maybe actually try to read it if I can bring
Okay.
myself to not dry heave.
That's
So do you
so
want to run
good.
down your list real quick? Just say the
Yeah.
names. Don't explain anything about them, but
Yeah.
just so we can get it in there, and then we'll actually put that up in the show notes for people to see too.
Yeah. So I talked about the first one I had was Halo 5 Reach. There's also Halo Kilo 5 series, the Red Rising series, the Expanse series,
Yep.
specifically the Nemesis games, best one out of there. We talk about Ready Player One. There's the Caledonian Gambit. That's really good. Ender's Game actually was on my list too as well. Terms of Use. Then there's 3 Star Wars books: Revan, Fatal Alliance, and Thrawn that are fantastic. There's a lesser known author that wrote Extracted, which again I'll have links in here for all these books. So if you can just click on them and go right to it. The Martian, which is
I
fantastic
got to
and
read that one.
movie. Yeah, first of all, movie's amazing. Book is amazing too. So, the writer, which is also a very small, has a really small author. Well, he's written a lot of books, but I don't think a lot of people know about him. I'll put a link in there, and that's a thriller crime book. And then The Last Kingdom, which is historical fiction, which there are several other books in that, but is also now has its own TV series.
I didn't know that was a
That is
book.
Yeah, The Last Kingdom is a book
Huh.
and a series of books, and is historical fiction, but the TV series is loosely based off of both. So it's pretty funny, but yeah, that's my list.
I'll run down mine real quick. So I said the Enders series, the Song of Ice and Fire series, which is Game of Thrones, as people now call it. The
Yeah,
Lord of the Rings books. Tentatively, The Hobbit. I haven't finished it yet, though I hear that's awesome too. The Expanse series, also great. Ready Player One. I also had Star Wars Revan and Star Wars Heir to the Empire, which are different Star Wars books. You had one of
definitely
those.
good. Hmm.
There's a series or 2 book series called Warrior and then Witch by Marie Brennan. I really enjoyed that one. The Boy and the Samurai, because I love samurai.
Yeah,
StarCraft, Liberty's Crusades. That was a book from StarCraft, the game. Great. Also, Aliens, Earth Hive, which is a book from the Aliens franchise.
nice.
The Garden and the Stone, great book. Band of Brothers, oh, such a moving book. Black Hawk Down, also a great book. Rendezvous with Rama, old science fiction, very great. Elric of Melon that is a old fantasy book. The Giver,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah,
Atlas Shrugged, and The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. I love those books. And then Rainbow Six, and then Last Man Standing. Those are my books.
not to be confused with a Tim Allen TV series, which is pretty good.
God
I
no.
read that. I read that. Aaron and I both read that one. Wait, Last Man Standing. Um, I have one call out to you. The The Giver.
Yes,
So that was something that we read in school. So,
same. I read it
oh
first
wow,
in school, and then I read it again separately. Or I actually
nice,
read it as a summer reading list book. So
very nice.
yeah.
Cool. Well, hope you guys enjoyed that. We will leave links in the show notes, but now it's on to the good old part where we rant about things because that's what millennials do, or well, in Josh's case, gatekeeper of millennial and whatever generation he is.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure, sure.
So as we had already mentioned, um, and if you're not paying attention to the news, really recently, Apple announced that they have their conference coming up on September 12th. We'll announce the new phone, blah blah blah. But the problem is, and this is what always happens with every company, as we get closer and closer to these events, one thing that really bugs me is, and I know this is probably to keep people, make sure that people have jobs so they can do this, but please stop leaking all the information because you're ruining my excitement. I don't want to know everything about the phone beforehand. And if I try my best to avoid the leaks, it's really hard when you work in IT and a lot of the people you work with are fans or fanboys or like to point out the flaws of the other company. And I don't want to have that ruined for me and that excitement ruined for me when it gets to the date when they actually announce it. So I know some people have to do it to keep their job. I get it. And some people like to do it because they're jerks. I get it too. And some people just have so much time in their life. They just like to wait until someone posts pictures on a public website for some stupid reason. I don't know. But please stop ruining it. And and other companies that do it to get better PR, just please stop. Like, I really appreciate that.
Well, they're not gonna. And have you tried not reading them?
Yeah, it doesn't work. I like reading the news, and I frequently use Apple News, and I use all Google News when I'm at work. And like, I try to avoid it, but the problem is when they have the freaking headlines, and it says Apple is announcing flying pigs, and they're like, well, great. I now know Apple's announcing flying pigs. I'm trying to avoid that.
Yeah, just take it with a grain of salt. Like, they don't know that. You don't know that. Just, well, whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, I guess, but whatever. I just get all bummed. I don't remember it being like this all the time. I think
it's always been like this. No, it's always been like this.
I guess
it's always been like this, and it's like a science now. Like it's a given now. But it used to be even worse because there were so few and far between that, like, if one leaked, it was huge. It was a huge, huge thing. So,
ooge, nice,
huge. Cool, good rant. Mine is ridiculous, so I'm going to say it, and then you can fire me from the podcast.
Got it.
I would like you to get out of my way. I would like you to be done. I would like you to stop it. And who am I talking about? Myself. I'm talking about myself. I need you to get out of my way, self. Stop treating yourself so poorly. And also, can you stop getting in your own way? Stop thinking about everything all the time, constantly about everything and nothing and everything, and just going around and around in circles, and get out of your head, man. You know? Come on, self. Listen to yourself. For goodness sake, just stop. Just, I don't know, just do it. Use the Nike thing. Just do it. Don't think about it. Just do it. And rant.
Just use your infinite javelins.
Yeah, I'm tired of thinking about stuff. Just swear word, do it.
Wow. I don't know how to respond to that because I think we're not supposed to respond to our
you can respond to it. If you want to yell at me, that's fine.
I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not firing you. Because I never hired you. We just did. There's no hiring process.
You're hired. Wait. Cool.
Wow.
Well, thanks.
Well, I hope you feel better getting that off your chest.
I feel great.
Because I think we do that to each other.
Hopefully, when I listen back for the edit, I'll be like, "You're right, self," and then I'll put my computer down and run outside and go do all kinds of things.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, then I would have a hard time yelling at you and be like, "Hey, get your together." Oh crap! I swore. Get your stuff together. That's what I would say.
Yes, there you go.
You're gonna have to cut that out because I'm not making this explicit.
Oh,
dang it!
Goodness.
Anyways, are you ready to close this out?
Oh, yeah. I was born ready.
Okay. Thank you all for listening to our 19th episode. You can follow the show on Twitter at DigitalDividePC or send us feedback by sending an email to askdigitaldivide@gmail.com. You can also get all this information on our website at www.digitaldividepodcast.com. And if you like us that much, you can follow our personal accounts. I am on Twitter at JustinFry121. And Josh, where can people find you?
On Twitter, you can find me at jcharletto. That's my first initial last name, JCIARLETTO. And you can also email me at josh@charletto.com. And yeah, feel free to email me anytime.
Anytime. If you liked this episode or any of our episodes, give us a review on iTunes or anywhere you are listening to the podcast. And until next time, take care.
Bye.